Hi everyone, I'm CERIC, the Program Learning and Development Specialist at CERIC. And on behalf of all the CERIC team, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. And today we are delighted to start a new webinar series with a group of amazing experts coming to you today to discuss the result of our recent National Business Survey, but also to come and share the insight on the current challenges and opportunity for both employers and career development professionals. And to moderate this great conversation, I'm thrilled to be joined by Candy Ho, CERIC's Vice Chair and Assistant Professor, Career and Capstone Learning at the University of Fraser Valley. But before going any further, I would like to acknowledge the lands from where we are learning today. And I would like to invite you to consider the Indigenous connection, past and present, to the land where you are living. I would like to acknowledge that for me and the CERIC's team, the Huron-Wendat, Petun, Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Mississauga Anishinaabe of New Credit share a special relationship to the territory in which our office and my home are located in Toronto. So we are grateful to have this opportunity to learn together on these lands today. I would like also to take a few minutes to introduce you to CERIC and share some housekeeping notes with you all. So CERIC is a charitable organization that focuses on education and research in career counseling and career development in Canada. We fund projects that create new knowledge and develop innovative resources. So we have three main programs: the Canexus National Career Development Conference, the CareerWise.ca website, which features the top news and view in the field with a French version called Orientation.ca, and the Canadian Journal of Career Development, which is free to access. Of course, we've delivered learning such as this webinar series today. So you can learn more about all of the CERIC's work and resources by visiting our website at CERIC.ca. And also because CERIC is always looking at new webinars or learning opportunity for you guys, we encourage you to share your learning needs for 2022, along with the feedback you will have on this new webinar series in the survey that we will share with you at the very end of the series, which is this Thursday. So thank you so much for your answer. And now just a couple of housekeeping notes for today's webinar. You can interact with our group of panelists and ask your question or share your comment at any time by using the question function you see on your screen. We will have a dedicated time for Q&A at the end of the webinar where our panelists will welcome your questions. And please note that we will send you the recording of today's webinar along with the presentation slide in the next 24 hours. But with all that, I'm happy now to pass it over to Candy Ho, who will present you the key results of the survey and moderate our panel conversation. So over to you, Candy.
Hey, hello everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I have, just give me a couple of seconds here while I load up the slides. And we are good to go. You should be seeing the slides right now with the wonderful faces of a wonderful panelist today. So I'm thrilled to be here with you, and thank you everybody for taking the time to learn about the findings from our survey. I also start by paying respects to the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam nations today, on whose land I'm situated as a first-generation immigrant and uninvited guest. It's because of their stewardship that I'm able to be here and learn together with you all. Just so you know, we have over 900 people, I think it's 960 plus registered for the session. It's definitely an indication of the interest that we have on this topic on career development in the workplace with respect to employer and employee engagement. So we'll first start off by diving into the key findings of the report, and then you'll hear from our expert panel. So I'm really excited in a little while for you to hear from the four panelists today, and shortly after the key findings, I'll introduce you to them in a bit, but just so you can see, their titles and their roles for now. And so with our survey, it's conducted by Environics for CERIC, and this is the national survey conducted in November, December of last year, and it was designed to update and expand the understanding of the state of career development in the Canadian workplace, including the impact of the pandemic. So we've had a sample of 501 senior executives from Canadian businesses of various sizes, locations, which include urban, rural, and suburban, as well as industries. So what we'll say is that this is the second iteration of the survey. So we were able to provide some high level of comparability to our 2013 survey. And so the National Business Survey, we tackled a number of big issues here. First of them being the challenges that are faced by employers today. You will have a copy of this survey also mailed to you along with the webinar as well, so you can follow along. So on the left here, we asked them, what's the biggest challenge you face? We ranked the options starting from the most challenging. First, top of the list, affecting their businesses are shortage of skilled workers, finding their workers, and supply chain issues, and the list goes on. On the right, we've made some comparisons between our 2021 results to the 2013 results. So for example, 75% of the executive survey identify a shortage of skilled workers to be either very somewhat challenging, very or somewhat challenging, as opposed to in 2013, it was 68%, so a bit lower. Considering the context and the changes that we've experienced in the last 2.5 years, new options were also added that were not previously asked in 2013. The employer perspective on the recruitment process was also another relevant aspect of our survey. So on the left, you'll see that 81% of the employer survey, they express difficulty in finding people with the right skill set. And the main reasons for this are finding the qualified candidates, reliable candidates with the right work ethic for their organization, with some of them saying, it's a really competitive markets within their respective industries. And then looking at the results between 2013 and 2021, it doesn't seem like employers have changed much in terms of their priorities or strategies to attract and reach members of the underrepresented groups. Of course, we would have wanted to see a significant increase, yet, something to be mindful of is the interpretation of the data. That's majority of the employers right now, representative of small and medium enterprises, they're struggling to keep their businesses open. So they've got a lot on the go and dealing with difficult choices. Perhaps we're thinking that this means that they weren't able to shift their focus on more important matters, like being able to hire underrepresented groups in their recruitment and retention. Okay, and also attracting candidates and finding the right new employees is just one side of the coin here, because we have to also talk about retention. We asked executives if they have found retaining employees to be more or less difficult, or has there been any change at all? So to retain employees, it proved to be more challenging compared to pre-pandemic era. And for employers who said that they experience more difficulty, you'll see on the right side there, the skills gap is much more tangible for them because they saw the difficulty, they perceived difficulty in finding people with the right soft skills. We also asked if they've implemented any recruitment and retention practices over the last 2 years and whether they're considering doing so. So overall, we noticed a small minority of employers have implemented new policies and practices in the last 2 years, and fewer are considering them moving forward. So this is something for all of us to consider here. How can career development professionals help employers see the value of new policies and practices based on what we see in the landscape here related to recruitment and retention, and make it easy for them to implement these for the future, given that they are operating with limited bandwidth. Unsurprisingly, this also came up when we asked you, as you register for this webinar, what's one thing that you want to learn? This was a consistent theme based on what we saw. And then over 77% of employers perceive a skills gap in their industries. The majority of them think the skills gap has increased over time, followed closely by those who felt it stayed the same for the last 5 years, and minority being optimistic and considering, the skills gap has decreased in time. What I want to know is, what the people who are more optimistic, what are they doing in order to hold this perception, and what's working for them? As solutions to close the skills gap, employers feel it's their responsibility to offer training for new employees, then to expect the prospective employees that are interviewing for these roles to prepare on their own to face challenges in the labor market. So this is refreshing to see, because there's an increased awareness now based on the results that we gather in 2013. And then the net difficulty in finding people with soft skills, human skills, power skills, whatever you call it, it's increased by 12% compared to 2013, as you can see on the right. Some of the questions that we need to consider here would be, could the current context, 2.5 years being in the pandemic, be potential explanation for this? And in career development for years, really, we've been talking about the value of soft and human skills. Are employers starting to value them as much as we emphasize them with their clients? If so, let's keep that up, because this is really good to see. And then again, confirming a shift in employers' minds about soft and human skills. So when faced with the choice, hiring choice, only a minority of them would keep searching for the right candidate with technical skills. The majority of them would say, I would hire the person with strong soft skills, and I will provide training to support them. So this is good, really good to see. Going back to the idea of employers and responsibilities, again, 73% of employers from the survey agree that it rests on their shoulder to provide their employees career management programs. So this is good news for us all around in the field, right? So let me give you a second look here. The majority of employers agree that they should provide career management programs to their employees. However, only 27% of them actually do. So there's a big difference between words and actions. They need to walk the talk. So there's some work for us to do here with employers. And then there's one final point to bring up here. So this will become a conversation starter for our panelists today, and one of the main reasons why we're here, trying to talk about bridging a gap between employers and CDPs. So only a bit less than half of the folks are aware that career development professionals are out there. And furthermore, only 12% of employers have actually worked with them in the past. I know, that was my initial reaction too. So there's work to do here to raise the awareness of the work that we all do and the value that we bring to employers, employees, and organizations. So I'm going to talk less and invite the panelists now. So this brings us to the much anticipated dialogue that we'll have with our panelists. So let me introduce them to you now, and it's my absolute pleasure to start with Leah Nord. She's the Senior Director of Workforce Strategies and Inclusive Growth at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Leah. In this capacity, Leah leads the Chamber's policy and projects related to Industry 4.0 and the future of work and talent, employment standards and compliance, and immigration, and also oversees the Canadian Chamber's Inclusive Growth Strategies Growth Initiative. Excited to hear from you, Leah, and nice to see you again. Next, we've got Jim Stanford, who is an economist and director of the Centre for Future Work. Jim is one of Canada's best known economists. He served for over 20 years as economist and director of policy with Unifor, Canada's largest private sector trade union. He has provided research and advice on economic policy, innovation, jobs, and social policy. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us. As Director of Partnerships and Experiential Learning for the Business and Higher Education Roundtable, BHER, Andrew, welcome. Andrew Beeler manages all aspects of research project development and delivery. Andrew joins from the Conference Board of Canada, where he led national consultations on work integrated learning and managed a research portfolio on experiential learning. Thank you, Andrew. And then last but not least, we've got Brian Convery, who is a purpose-driven, people-centric executive with over 3 decades of diversified and progressive global experience. As a talent leader, his work spans a wide range of industries and disciplines in both public and private sectors, from consumer products, technology, consulting services, and human resources, financial services, and banking. The list goes on, to being currently in construction with Aecon Group. Thank you, Brian, for joining us. And I will also say that we had a technology check last week, and based on the dialogue and the interaction between the panelists, I know that we're in for a great conversation here today. And just a reminder to panelists that I've got questions that I like to pose. However, if anybody would like to jump in after I've initially posed it to one of you, please do, to enrich this dialogue so that we can all enhance our learning. So let's get started. First, I want to pose that first question to Andrew here. And what I'd want to know is, what are some solutions to reconcile this gap between employers declaring difficulties in hiring young workers, and also young workers saying that they have difficulties finding a job?
Thanks, Candy. So there's quite a lot of resonance between the results that you showed from the recent CERIC survey and the recent Business Council of Canada survey that we administer with Canada's 150 largest employers, and which you can find on the Business and Higher Education Roundtable website. So a lot of my response here will draw on that survey in particular, but I think there's quite a lot of commonality. So employers expect increasingly stronger skills from recent grads, from human skills to increasingly specialized technical skills and experience requirements. How we manage those expectations and the evolving expectations of recent grads for entry-level jobs, I think, has to be part of the solution here. More concretely, we need more user-friendly labor market information, and your recent webinar with the LMIC addressed some of that. And we need innovations to address the gaps in our career pathway ecosystem, and advance stronger integration of secondary, post-secondary, employment service provider supports for young people. And of course, we need to close the experience gap by ensuring every post-secondary student has access to a work-integrated learning, which I'll call a WIL, opportunity during their first degree or diploma, and address some of the gaps for equity-deserving students with a focus on utilizing our international talent pool. We know employers prioritize recent grads with experience. Among employers who engage students as part of BHER's WIL program, 8 out of 10 gained access to resources to help fill a skills gap, and 1 in 5 reported hiring a student after the experience. We know that post-secondary students who participate in the WIL are more likely to find employment related to their field of study, of course. So we know WIL is a big part of the solution here. Though barriers to accessing WIL persist, especially among students in underrepresented programs, so in the arts and humanities especially, and among equity-deserving students, so with international students, for example. So we have a long way to go, ensuring every student gains access to a work-integrated learning opportunity. We have seen some encouraging trends, and here I'll draw on the Business Council of Canada survey. There's a sharp rise in the number of individuals entering the workforce with a WIL opportunity. And of course, BHER's WIL program has been a big part of this story. We've generated nearly 40,000 WIL opportunities in the past year, and I'm pleased to report. And of course, more generally, we've seen some meaningful improvement in access to entry-level talent with relevant work experience. So, this year's Business Council survey, 63% of employers said that their entry-level employees typically have relevant experience in their industry, whereas only 24% said the same thing in 2018, so 4 years ago. So that's a meaningful improvement. Employers are increasingly turning to the immigration system as part of their recruitment efforts, Candy. So, for example, 21% of the businesses we surveyed anticipated recruiting more international students studying in Canada. And an obvious way for Canadian employers to recruit more international students is through WIL. This is a sizable talent pool, and nearly 400,000 international students were enrolled at Canadian institutions this past year. But we're not utilizing the talent pool, I don't think. A few federal and provincial WIL programs support international students. BHER's World program is one of the exceptions on this front. But if we want to truly, close those gaps, I think we have to expand access and scale up supports for international students in Canada's work integrated learning programs to help connect them to the local labor force, advance regional talent retention, and advance some more multilingual, diverse workplaces for Canadian employers. So those are a few thoughts, and perhaps I'll turn it over to our other panelists here to chime in.
Does anybody have anything to add to that? Okay, why don't I move on to the next question, and then we can engage in a dialogue again. So the next question I'd like to pose is to Jim. Jim, you talked at Connexus 2021, thank you again, and the presentation was Building Back Better, How Work Needs to Change for Good After COVID. And you shared a compelling vision on the future of work and what needs to change after COVID. So we're more than a year later and we're still dealing with COVID, likely for a long time with the after effects as well. Curious to know, has your vision changed since, and have you seen positive outcomes in the meantime? Wondering if you can share where you see opportunities are for innovation related to recruitment and retention. Oh, Jim, you're muted. So, oh, that's strange. Hang on.
Well, let me try to help Jim, and maybe we can jump on another question.
Okay. Thanks, CERIC. All right, so thank you, Jim. My next question might be more for Brian and Leah, but I'll also invite the other panelists to jump in if they want to. So this is a big one. So in the report, we noticed that 81% of the employees said they struggle with recruitment and retention, but 45% are only aware of CDPs, and 41% have never heard of them. I'm wondering if you can comment on this from large organizations, small, medium enterprises perspective. What can we do in the career development field to raise awareness and to demonstrate the value that we can provide to employers? And how should career development professionals approach them? So Brian, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So this is a rather large one to unpack. When you look at the overall, what I would call talent cycle or life cycle, recruitment and retention are just two pieces of that puzzle. And so when we look at that from the ground up and look at the opportunities that we have in front of us, recruitment as an overall perspective, and looking at some of the results from the study, I want to point out a few things that were actually captured by some of the executives. And when I talk about this, think in the mindset of attraction and engagement. So close to 1 in 5 executives said they still put a lot of effort in overall, not 1 in 5, almost 7 in 10 put a lot of support still on the fact that resumes are the #1 way that continues to be the way we learn about talent. And when I look at that figure, it's a bit challenging because the ecosystem of how we engage with talent has changed. A resume is typically looking at someone from a point of time based on some experiences that they have. I don't know who's been to a resume workshop recently, but they're not always focused on skills. And earlier, Andrew was focusing on the skills gap. Well, if we're not discussing skills in resumes, and 7 out of 10 executives are looking at resumes the way to discover talent, then we have a disconnect. So I think that the attraction and engagement side of recruitment needs to be looked at by all organizations, large, small, medium. And when we talk about recruitment and elevate to the idea of talent and talent acquisition, there's a difference. Recruitment, worrying about maybe putting people in positions, talent acquisition, more of an advisor, more of looking at the overall end-to-end solution we're trying to solve for, and also get comfortable with hiring ahead and hiring for future skills, not just the current needs. So that whole recruitment piece is complex. And depending on the size of the organizations, the value that's put in talent, the amount of tools, technology, and processes that actually work for those that are out there, primarily acting as your sales force to attract people to your organizations. If some of those things aren't where they need to be, then that might be part of the struggle, is the investment and the investment in talent that needs to be had. When I look at the retention side of the equation, this, to my mind, brings more of the idea of talent management. So we got them to the door, now they're here. Are they feeling welcome? Are they feeling engaged? Are they feeling there's a employee experience that they're excited about coming to work? You know, when you look at the idea here around attracting underrepresented groups, that's where the 1 in 5 said they put a lot of effort into customizing recruitment to find underrepresented groups. Okay, that was what, 2 years ago? Maybe it's time to look at the retention, and are those the people that are leaving? So, you know, we can put it in that perspective too, and I really take a deeper dive into the retention strategies and what organizations are doing to keep all employees, regardless of unrepresented or not. And that really leads to your talent management piece, again, focusing on that as an experience for an employee. And I would add in there that maybe the talent management piece, the learning, when you look at that as an employee and as a hire, you know, we know the 70-20-10 rule is really the best way that people learn. So 70% from experience, 20% from other people, and 10% from structured courses. So if you're still focusing on structured courses and not introducing that experiential side of things back to those experiences, and 20% of engaging and networking with people in your organization, then you're only hitting about 10% through courses, which again could lead to your retention issues. The fact that 45% are not aware of career development professionals is quite alarming and shocking. I think, though, it goes back to the ecosystem. Is the structure and the ecosystem set up for employers, career professionals, others to engage? So if you have a larger team, and you might be able to have that conversation where recruiters are talking to career development professionals, but what's happening above? What is the full experience as it relates to an organizational's approach to engaging career development professionals? And what is the matrix of that relationship? We really need to look at this from a matrix relationship and make sure that all parts of both organizations are involved in that, or we'll continue to be at the not aware stage or having not worked with them scenarios. What can career development professionals do? I think, you know, looking at ways to automate and streamline processes so you can spend more time with the talent and with the organizations. I know there's quite a bit of things that still feel like they're stuck back in previous decades in the way that we engage as far as posting jobs and doing different things. So is there an opportunity there to kind of streamline, look at technology? Again, those three, process, technology, and people, would be a good way to attack that one. And how should CDPs approach employers? I think with an open mind, and the idea that, back to this learning is part of the ecosystem, it's part of will, it's part of experiences, it's experiential learning, it's lived experiences. And how do we actually get talent to be able to talk about those experiences, and how do we actually train them to talk about their skills? I see here, you know, the soft skills are really needed. Are those communicated on a resume? Back to the resume, probably not. So how do we actually arm individuals to have a different narrative with career development professionals and the employers coming to the table to have those discussions, so we can allow and create an opportunity for new employees and candidates to talk about what they're bringing to the table? You know, you speak 3 languages from another country, that's something to talk about, right? But again, what is transferable skills? What is human skills? What is soft skills? Are we actually teaching candidates to talk about those skills? And if we're not, then the skill gap might be also part of the problem. Will be the fact that it's not being articulated because they think they're talking to a job posting that doesn't call those things out. So that's a few of my perspectives on this situation. I'd love to hear from others on it.
Thank you, Brian. Leah, what's your perspective?
Hi, and you'd think 2 years into this pandemic, we'd have the tech glitches worked out. I keep bumping in and out here, folks, so hopefully this will work. I just want to say hi and acknowledge that I'm coming to you. It's this afternoon for me in Ottawa, the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. I use the pronouns she, her, and elle, and I'm in my home office still this afternoon in my basement. I'm wearing a purple and white striped shirt, purple glasses, and I've got my hair pulled back here a bit. And I missed some pieces here, but this I think we're just building off each other and so excited. I want to just open my comments by saying I think there is a huge potential here for opportunity. We are, knock on wood, coming out of a pandemic and headed into inclusive recovery. It's a time of, sort of renewal and optimism and possibility that I think we all have to grab onto in any number of ways. The other piece for us in this country is we're not dealing with labor shortages. We're actually dealing with a labor crisis here. We have close to 1 million jobs. It's varying month to month here, but anywhere between 890 and 900,000, 950, 980 job vacancies in this country. Sectors like manufacturing, construction, healthcare services, food and accommodation, and even retail, diverse sectors are leading, but every sector, every part of this country and every size of business are affected by these labor shortages. And Candy, you brought up those numbers that we're looking at. Skill shortages is the #1 issue for business and economic growth. What I want to do, though, is sort of frame it in a constructive way to give us a little bit of a dose of reality. And I don't want to overstate this, but I do want to provide some perspective. Candy, you did indicate this from the small and medium-sized enterprise lens. However, reminding ourselves that over 99% of the businesses in this country are small and medium-sized businesses. Pre-pandemic numbers, but they employed 10.6 million Canadians, which is 90% of the workforce. And between 2013 and 2017, they were responsible for 85% of the net growth in this country. But, to state the obvious, we've also had a pandemic, right? And my colleagues at CFIB, I'm going to give you 2 data points. The first is that the average debt of a Canadian business right now is $160,000, folks. There is opportunity here because of the labor shortage, but they're trying to make rent. I don't want to overstate that, but I do want to provide some perspective. And last week was Mental Health Week, and 66% CFIB surveyed their members are near their breaking point, right? And they realize their employees are at their breaking point as well. There's a lot going on here, right? There's rent, there's GST remittances. They were deferred, which we're grateful for the government for, but they're trying to do that. There's mental health issues, there's labor issues. So this brings it to the top, is what I want to say. But there's also some issues in there, and I think that's indicative from your findings as well, right? We know it's an issue, but it's sort of the then what. I just want to provide a few ideas about the recommendations that I would have from the Canadian Chamber and our members. And just to be clear on that, Canadian Chamber represents 200,000 businesses across the country, across sectors, across sizes. We have a network of 450 local boards of trade and chambers across the country. I think some of them are registered, and would invite them to jump into what I'm going to say as well. Just to flag that we do have a series of recommendations to federal and various governments. I mean, WIL is an excellent, an excellent mechanism to state the obvious, and to provide wage subsidies and stipends and onboarding is a huge benefit. Don't let me diminish that. But there's no capacity on the size of business, right? To take that, absorb it, move on with it. If you're a smaller business, right? We don't have HR departments. We don't have that capacity. But I understand, Andrew, I love your numbers, but 1 in 5 are hiring as well, because you don't even need to have a bad experience. You kind of need to have that was a lot of work experience to sort of turn you off, that going forward, or a Canada Summer Jobs program. So things like tax credits and helping the business side have capacity is great. Andrew, I loved your comment about labor market data. I am all about labor market data, particularly from the demand side, and that's a whole other conversation. You know, we know trends, we know the economy is greeny, but what does that actually mean, right? We can scrape job boards, we can do a lot of things that tell us trends, but where are the jobs needed, how, and what are the capacities? And interesting, I just want to flag, you know, a little thing in and around, Andrew was talking about international students, right? The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, we actually have a policy resolution that recommends to the federal government that they eliminate the requirement for a co-op work permit for an international student. We get this, right? And from the business side, we see the value of this, and we have, you know, for a number of years running recommended that. I mean, in this whole work of will and these days, something like that, or even the hours that you're allowed to work off campus is just so irrelevant in today's world. So we get those pieces. I just want to, you know, what you can, you know, what can you folks do and work with business as well. And I really like some of Brian's comments too, but it's meeting them where they're at, right? To even have this understanding and not kind of coming, you know, with the proverbial guns blazing, we're going to rescue you, here are students, they're going to say, you know, and I know that's a bit hyperbole, but know that. And then the other thing, Candy, that I've talked about before is this idea of, you know, collaboratives or concierge services. And the example I'll give is out of KW, the KW Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber, and it's a project now that BHER funds, right? And so I have a colleague there, Allison, who runs the program. She hires interns herself, right? And co-op students and will students, sorry folks, I should know the nomenclature better. And they act as a concierge to their members, right? So it's by business, for business. We speak the language a little better, but I'm of course partial to local chambers and boards of trade, but that can be local ECDEVs. It can be, you know, local sector associations. It can be other local business associations where small businesses gather. It's not picking them off one by one, and they're getting approached by, you know, settlement organizations and, you know, Employment Ontario, you know, it's an amplifying force, and I have a lot to say about that, but that's where I think sort of the future lies. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Leah. Andrew, floor is yours.
Thanks for the shout out to Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, Leah, and I couldn't agree more, you know, with the need for concierge services to support small businesses in Canada, you know, because what we're seeing, I think, is, you know, with the latest skills survey, you know, which was with Canada's largest corporations, you know, we are seeing more collaboration, especially on will, between employers and higher education institutions. But we know that barriers persist for small businesses, and I like that suggestion of, you know, meeting employers where they're at, you know, in the current context, the tight labor market, the debt, all of those contexts. And I think we need more supports for small businesses to help them access the talent they need at this moment, and to meet them where they're at, so to speak. And you know, building on your points, Brian, I really like the notion of the skills articulation gap, right? You know, because we do need to, that's something that we need to bring, you know, career development practitioners into collaboration with employer associations and chambers on, I think, you know, because, you know, a lot of students go through post-secondary, go through various employment and training without having that support of understanding, of awareness of human skills, which we know are continue to be top of mind for employers, and without the support to learn how to articulate those, not only in CVs and resumes, to your point, Brian, but in multiple networking and interview and all kinds of you know, context. So I think we need to come together and try to work on the skills articulation challenges. Certainly our post-secondary institutions are putting effort towards online records of experience and trying to support that, but we need to push that further, and we need to bring foreground certainly the voice of career development practitioners, to your point, Candy, around, you know, how few employers even know of the supports that they offer and what they could do on that front. So just a few comments back on that front. You know, there's the skills gap, but there's the skills articulation gap, and figuring out how to bring the right people together to tackle that one, I think, is crucial.
Mm-hmm. And I would say before that, there's a skills awareness gap in which we need to help students and clients understand, how do you transfer those skills? What do they have in the first place? So this is really, really interesting. Thank you for that.
And if I could just jump in really quickly, Candy, to build off on both sides of this, right? I'm a big fan of previous life of study and study abroad, right? So I've even experienced now in the role I have, because if I see that someone has that, I will ask them about that. And they will tell me it was transformation. And that is great. What does that mean, right? So, you know, breaking that down. And on the other side, but it's both sides as well. I mean, this is the perennial discussion we've been having about skills and competency-based training. And I will tell you know, this gap, the first question you had for Andrew, right? When my members say, you know, students aren't ready. Well, it's time, you know, you've got responsibility in this as well, right? And I think, you know, again, the opportunity around labor shortages, labor crunch, we encourage just little things like, well, let's review a job description and see what you really need in there and what's the nice to have and what does that look like. You want communication, you got to articulate that a bit so that it can be articulated to you as well, right? And that does take some thought in it, you know, or even, you know, more diverse, like scan your resume and there's a few really quick and easy tools out there to say, are you being, you know, open and diverse in the language that you're using as well. So little tricks on both sides to sort of bring them together and closer together anyway for win-win on both sides.
Yeah, I find that it's the small things and goes back to what Brian was saying, you know, are you making people feel welcome? And that starts with the job description.
Absolutely. And I think the other issue, you know, I've seen it from both sides in working with career development professionals, and I'm not going to say that they also don't have barriers to engage with students as well. And I think that if schools and institutions are really going to look at, we're much more than just providing that 10% education side of things. When you look at the 70-20-10 thing, it is also about how do all students have access to career development professionals, because right now they don't. They do not have access to all career development professionals. Some schools are structured like a small government, and when you try to actually get into what areas to get support and help, it's a challenge to navigate. And some students, if I even ask them, have you been to your career development professional officer, don't even know where it is. And especially given COVID, the last 2 years, that's another accessibility issue, right, for them to be able to engage. So how do we collectively, and how do career development professionals get funded, supported by their institutions to actually do the career development discussions with the students so that we can prepare them for the interviews, for the conversations? And I like what Leah said, it's all of us coming together. And we also need to help the schools to expand in those areas, because the first thing to get cut when we go through cycles, it seems career development professionals get smaller and smaller departments, yet there's more and more students to engage with. So, you know, focusing on those tangible things with the students sometimes end up either they can't get to it, or it falls to someone else to take care of, or it falls to no one, and we're all going like this on who's taking care of it.
Mm-hmm. Music to my ears, and I know that we've got folks from post-secondary that have signed up for this, so thank you, Brian. I want to go back to Jim. Jim, thank you so much. I think your audio works now, so.
Okay, hopefully it does. Can you hear me, Candy?
Yay,
Excellent. Okay. It works before the webinar started, and then it stopped as soon as the webinar started. And my only possible explanation is there's someone in Pierre Poilievre's campaign who doesn't want me to speak today and hacked into the system. I don't know. I'm just, look, just because you're paranoid, it doesn't mean people aren't following you, right? So I've got to be suspicious of these things. Anyways, apologies for that. Candy, you asked about the work that I had done earlier about, you know, things to learn about work during the pandemic, and we did publish a report that had 10 ways to fix work for good after COVID-19, and for good meaning both senses of the word, for better, but also on an ongoing basis. Because I do think the pandemic highlighted some of the deeper and ongoing structural problems in how we organize work and how we treat working people in Canada. So you had asked Candy, you know, what's the progress report on those 10 items from my to-do list 2 years into the pandemic. I won't go through all 10, but I'll identify a good and a bad and an unknown from my list. One of the things I mentioned was the need to provide workers with more protection to stay home from work when they are ill. for their own health, for their colleagues and customers' health, and during a pandemic for public health. And Canada had an abysmal set of protections for paid sick entitlements and job protections if you were off sick. So we did bring in some emergency measures at both the federal and provincial level when the pandemic started to allow people to stay home without suffering a giant financial penalty for doing that. And now we have some jurisdictions, so far just the federal government and British Columbia, where I'm coming from, that have implemented paid sick leave on an ongoing basis. And I think this is very important. If we just say, well, that was COVID-19 and now we're done with it, we are setting ourselves up for a disaster down the road. So I think part of recognizing the value of work and workers after the pandemic is to fix that problem. One that's unknown is the issue of income security, kind of related. As soon as the pandemic started, everyone realized that our employment insurance system was not up to snuff in terms of protecting people during the layoffs that resulted in the early stages. And so we implemented the CERB and all of the other emergency measures, which were incredibly successful in protecting people, keeping them in their homes, keeping consumer spending going, and now setting us up for a recovery that's way faster than anyone, myself included, would have expected. But we still have an issue of how are we going to fix that system going forward. We have some temporary measures in place now in the employment insurance system, but those are going to have to be, I think, perfected and maintained, and the federal government has a big consultation on. So that one's a question mark. My negative one, where we haven't learned the lesson, is the whole problem of precarious work or insecure work in various forms. And it is amazing to me that we have employers, you know, we've heard today, complaining about a labor shortage and how we're not making the most of our people, and yet we think the wave of the future is hiring people to use their smartphone to ride around on a bike delivering fast food, where they spend half their day sitting around waiting, doing nothing, and not getting paid for it. This treatment of workers as a cheap, available, throwaway input really is a drag on our productivity, and it's a drag on our labor force, because I'm sure every employer on this line knows full well there's things that they could do with that person much more productively than having them ride around on a bike delivering fast food. So, and we have not really begun to address that. There's still this whole, I would say, manipulative argument that that type of work and other forms of insecure work, not just gig jobs, but contractors and part-time jobs and labor hire and temporary workers, is somehow a flexible and efficient way to organize the labor market, and it absolutely isn't. It absolutely wastes people's potential, and it disrupts the possibility of improving their skills and experience over time. So on that one, I think we've got a long ways to go. Let me conclude, Candy, just by throwing a couple of notes of caution about this notion of the labor shortage that we face. This is something that has changed during the pandemic. We've had the unemployment rate come down. We've had labor force participation rebound to higher than it was before the pandemic. But have we really run out of workers in the sense that is often implied by this discussion of a labor shortage? And I don't think that's true. We still have 1.1 million Canadians officially unemployed. And that doesn't tell the whole story, because you only count as officially unemployed if you were actively seeking work and didn't work even one single hour. So if you include the other pools of underutilized labor, we've still got a lot of people that we aren't using. And I think that what employers often call a labor shortage or a labor crisis simply means that the way it used to be a few years ago, where they could put an ad in the paper and expect 10 fully qualified or 20 fully qualified resumes on their desk the next morning, that's not happening anymore. And that was, in a way, I think employers became used to a permanent condition of desperate underutilized labor, which made their retention and training efforts easy. And it's not easy anymore. I'll recognize that. And not because people have stopped working. There are more Canadians working than there were before the pandemic, but they're demanding more. They're demanding better jobs. They have left retail and hospitality and gone to other sectors that offer more meaningful career paths. And the sectors with the highest job vacancies are, in fact, the sectors with low quality, high turnover jobs, where the wages on offer are very, very low, in many cases barely above minimum wage. So the highest incidence of job vacancies is in retail and hospitality, and they always have job vacancies. Why? Not because there aren't workers around, but because the jobs they're offering are so lousy. And so I'd say there's a wake-up call for employers in this, that they, since the pandemic, you can't treat workers just as a productive input to be maximized or optimized. You have to treat them as human beings, protect them, protect their health, support them, and treat them better if in fact you want to retain them. There's my 2 bits worth.
Thanks, Jim. I would invite any of the panelists to respond.
Or someone from Pierre Poilievre's campaign could call in, Candy. I'm open to their questions as well.
Well, Jim, thank you for being the one that got the tech issue. There has to be one in every single webinar, right? I'm noticing that we've got 10 minutes left in our webinar. This could have easily gone on for hours. So I've got a couple more questions here. I want to pose the next one to Andrew. So in your recent BIHAR report and Business Council of Canada, you highlighted WIL and remains the gold standard. And you talked about this earlier as well. So wondering what if you could share what employers can do to make the most out of WIL opportunities and support youth employment. Oh, now it's got passed on to Andrew for some strange reason.
My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's a great question, Candy, and hopefully build on some of what we've talked about so far. So employers have a lot to think about in terms of when it comes to investing in work integrated learning and maximizing the value they get from that investment. So, a lot of what I have to say here comes from some consultations that we did near the start of the pandemic, actually, with around 600 organizations from across Canada. And we essentially asked employers, what tools and resources do you need to scale up and commit to quality work integrated learning? And we built a suite of resources based on those consultations, which are on our Work Integrated Learning Hub, which one of my colleagues can share in the chat, perhaps. So a set of resources in there around investing in WIL, and essentially we wanted to support employers with those investment decisions. So you'll see a financial supports guide for employers that connects them to provincial and federal financial supports, wage subsidy programs, et cetera, an ROI calculator so they can actually quantify the value of their investment in WIL, and a related guide to help them think about work integrated learning as a long-term investment in the skills profile of your organization and a way to reduce your training and hiring costs. And so building on some of the resources that we have on that side, I encourage people to check those out. A couple of the factors that employers should think about are obviously the type of WIL programming, and as career development practitioners in the call would know, those really vary, from 5-year apprenticeships to 2-week micro placements and everything in between. Canada's largest companies tend to participate mostly in internships and co-ops. Those tend to be the most common, but there are a whole range of innovative approaches to work integrated learning that are also options. And when you think about this, which type to participate in, length of placement is also a factor to consider. Are you going to invest in a 1-year internship, for instance, or a multi-year apprenticeship? For those longer programs of training, there's more of an opportunity to reap those productivity benefits, which increase, as the student stays within your organization and becomes familiar with your processes and so forth. So there's more of an opportunity to reap those productivity and even innovation benefits. But, it really depends on what you're aiming for with when you look to engage a post-secondary student. And there we have like a whole Find Your WIL tool on the website that employers can check out, learn about that. In terms of maximizing and really supporting students, I always encourage employers to think about mentorship. We've heard that from employers that they feel they don't really have enough resources and support when it comes to mentorship. I think that's an interesting challenge for career development practitioners to think about. We've been developing some resources to support on that side, and we have a short mentorship course coming out this summer actually to support employers with training staff on how best to support post-secondary students during their placements, from everything from facilitating effective mentoring conversations to facilitating end of placement feedback. So Mentorship is really key, assessment, equity, diversity, and inclusion supports. And we have a guide up there on that. And I think that's an area, kind of a strand through this conversation that's quite interesting from your survey. I would like to see more progress on that front. I was surprised to see, not surprised to see so little progress on that front. And I think, Brian, your comments earlier around like a real culture of inclusion and welcoming, is so important, and employers need to think about that too. That needs to be at the heart of engaging early talent. So a few things to think about, Candy.
For sure.
A couple points to what Andrew said. I think right on with what you just said, and I think one of the things too is as groups like Be Her and See Will and other groups have worked together on Will and other things collectively, the greater scheme of the people engaged back as hiring managers, that education between, right now, a lot of times Will equals co-op, and that's all they know for the past whatever years. Now it's apprenticeships, it's internships. And what's happening is the workplace is changing. So, even for a 4-month summer co-op, which seems to be the traditional, the businesses are saying, well, I want them for 8 to 12 months, but then the school says, well, we don't offer that. So there is a disconnect in what's happening in the workplace, to your point, Andrew, about having longer term opportunities where the student can work for a full year, really get trained up and learn, not just for the 4-month period, but maybe for a year or longer, 16 months, you name it. But what happens is those requests come into the recruitment team, who is left talking to the career development professional, who says, well, that's not how it works here at my university or college. So therefore, those students are disadvantaged because they're only available for 4 months, and those are getting smaller and smaller as they're expanding the other way with longer term. So education on this ecosystem is severely needed at all levels for people to understand how it's evolving, how it's changing. No, Will does not just equal co-op. What are the other 9 forms of Will or outside of just co-op? And how do we engage the conversation beyond today to say, let's educate more people on what's available, and let's go back to the schools that say, sorry, my students can only work for 4 months, and have that conversation, not at the recruiter coordinator level who's writing the job description and filling the job. I'm talking at the highest levels of education, and with Be Her and See Will and other groups that can have those conversations. Otherwise, we're just going to continue in this cycle of things aren't matching up. And this is, I said talent acquisition earlier, but it's really talent matching, right? We're matching people to jobs. We're matching companies to talent. How do we make that an easier process and not have so much rigor in, well, thou cannot do this, but you can do that? And how do we start to question those changes and work together as an ecosystem to make that work? So great points, Andrew. I just wanted to share, like, that's still, I see it every day, and the boots on the ground, literally, with managers asking, like, I don't know where to go. I need someone for 12 months, and there's only one school that will help me. I know there's more than one, but I'm just saying that's some of the perceptions, right? And then managers get that idea in their head that that school only allows for 4 months, and then that's what they remember. So we don't go back. So how do we do that? How do we have that conversation?
One key phrase that keeps ringing in my head is the phrase, what got us here will not get us there. The call for doing better, looking at systems, looking at structures and saying, what can we do better, and shift as a result. So in the interest of time, we've got some enthusiastic audience who's posed some questions, and apologies in advance, we will not have time to answer all of the questions. So I'm just going to pick 2, and I'm going to invite those, if you want to follow up with our brilliant panelists after the session. So my first one goes to Leah, which the question that was posed by the audience is from employer's perspective, and I understand this will be unique to each field and job. What would be specifically the top human skills across sector that you see employers are wanting, so we can coach and direct people in career development? What's been consistent for you?
Yeah, and I think, at the end of the day, across whatever job, right, there's technical pieces to it, but any of the reports, your report, I look at Be Her, I look at any reports that are coming out, and we were even talking about this before the pandemic. It's taken on, I would say, sort of accelerated through it with hybrid and virtual workforces, is this, I don't I don't like the term human skills, but it's still in the vernacular. I call them durable skills as well, because they're so much more important than that. It's to be able to convey that, right? Studies will show that, especially in these evolving, you know, sectors like AI, that we don't have the training courses quite down yet as they continue to evolve. Employers, especially the bigger ones or the ones with the bigger capacities, will actually pluck the students and train them if they have the ability to be trained, right? Are malleable in, you know, problem solving, things like resilience, you know, and issues like that. So those are the skills. We've discussed this before. We've discussed it for decades prior and probably will be going forward. But those skills are really, really prominent. Again, not to the behest of technical skills. At the end of the day, so much of that is required in specific as well. But those have made their way up the chart, to be sure. And the pandemic as well. Reminder that the majority of Canadians could not work from home during this crisis. I think that's a very important reminder, folks. I think some of us tend to forget that a lot. But for those who did go home, you know, that whole virtual world that's a whole other discussion. And now coming back to hybrid, so employees who are have those human problem solving, communication, resiliency, and on one level they're very ethereal, but at the same time they're really, really important. And I would challenge even my employers to say, what do you mean by resilience? What do you mean by communicate, right? What do you mean by problem solving? To help you, help us, help you, help everyone, you know, bring that along. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah, I've come to learn that it's all about context. How do you demonstrate communication skills in your particular context that has allowed people to be successful? Thank you for that. My last question here from the audience is for Brian here. There's a couple of folks that wanted to know about the 70-20-10 breakdown. Could you elaborate more?
Sure. So even if you Google 70-20-10, you'll see a bunch of charts and theories around this learning concept of, you know, 70% of what we learn is through experience and through the opportunities that we do exercise. The 20% again is through people. So whether Andrew hit this earlier, the networking and mentoring of people, and that's the 20%. And then the 10% is strictly those, you know, courses that you actually take. So whether it's online, in person, what have you, is the model. So if you look at 70-20, 90% of how we learn comes from those experiences and also those connections. So if you think of it that way, how are we enabling those things to happen? How are you rolling out mentorship? How are you rolling out organic networking for people to talk to people in your organization? Maybe a student that's 2 years ahead of them that just went through this. All those things need to be taken into consideration also, along with the, you know, standard as well as online or in-person training as well. But when you think of 90% of how we learn comes through those lived experiences, experiential learning will go right down the list. That's where we should be thinking, and that's where we should be engaging, because that helps us to get the individuals educated and understanding and talking about their, I like what you said, Leah, like, you know, those critical skills that we want to talk about, right? It's very important that we, again, teach people how to talk about those things, because I find that in most interviews with young talent, they struggle with articulating what is a transferable skill, what is a human skill, what is a critical skill. Ask them the question, though, I don't know if they'll all be prepared to answer it, and that's where we need to start helping.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to officially close this panel by saying thank you so much for each of the panelists. So grateful for you to be here with us today, and I've learned so much that we're going to take away. And as mentioned to the audience, we will, along with a copy of this webinar, send along resources that are referred by our panelists as well. And you know, just connecting to what Jim has said at the end here, you know, we're looking at a new dimension here, and treating people as human beings remains the core. So thank you for sending us off with that. And also a big thank you to CERIC and Alexandra for putting together this event, and I'll pass it on back to CERIC.
Yeah, thank you, Candy. Absolutely, It's already time to wrap up this fantastic webinar. We got a lot of common great questions. Thank you all for your great engagement for today. And also, I want to say a special thanks, as you said, Candy, to our fantastic group of panelists. So Leah, Jim, Brian, and Andrew, thank you so much for this excellent panel conversation today, full of insightful commentary on the current challenges and opportunity for both employers and stakeholders we work with them. So I'm sure your comment will fuel the conversation that we will continue in 2 days. So thanks again for your participation and for having shared your great resources. So we will make sure to share those in our follow-up email that we'll send later this afternoon. And yes, I'm happy to say that we'll continue this important and interesting conversation on how to build a bridge between employers and CDP in our next webinar this Thursday, May 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll dive more on what's next, what we can offer, new strategies that CDP can apply. But as for now, let me close by wishing you a good rest of your day and see you all on Thursday.